I was born into a very collectivistic religion and family. Rules, beliefs, and loyalties all came before individual needs or thoughts. I was taught to be quiet, never say what I really thought, keep my head down, and never question anything. Verbal, physical, and sexual abuse were swept under the rug in order to maintain a peaceful facade. I believe that the culture I was brought up in is what caused me to have low self-esteem. I avoided people so that I would not feel put down or rejected. It turned into a self-fulfilling prophecy because I was so antisocial that I made very few friends. I could not and would not communicate well. My self-esteem had gotten so low, and I felt so helpless to change the way that I was thinking, interacting, communicating, and being communicated with, that I was suicidal. I finally decided I had the will to change. I knew I didn't have the skill to change on my own, and I needed help. I reached out and got counseling. It was one of the best things I have ever done. My counselor helped me to see the real me, not the perception I had been holding of myself. I developed self-value and learned to stop negative self-talk. I have more skills and confidence to interact and communicate. I used a bird cage to represent being trapped in a negative childhood and a butterfly on top of it because after counseling, I am changed and free to be happier. I'm an introvert. I have always known I am an introvert. I am extremely shy and prefer to work and play on my own rather than with others. I would be fairly happy being a hermit. I was surprised to find out from the personality survey that my introvert type is INFP, the description of which is performing noble service to help society. After thinking about it, I realized that because I went through neglect and sexual abuse as a child, I developed a determination to break the abuse cycle and wanted to protect others from similar pain. What better way to protect others than to stand up for them, work with them, and give them a voice? Getting out and being part of things is difficult for me as an introvert, but helping even one child know that they are valuable just because they exist is worth the world. I used a heart to represent wanting to help others, and I used a mirror to represent myself as an introvert because it is easier to look inward than out at other people. I am a self-discloser. Since going through counseling, there are times when I self-disclose too much. Group grief counseling is one of the best catalysts for healing. It was such a relief to share my grief and my pain. There are still times when I feel the need to talk about things that weigh on me, and I want to talk them out with someone, but I also know that sometimes I just blurt things out without thinking about the consequences of sharing. I learned in personal counseling to self-disclose for self-clarification and self-validation, which helped my self-esteem, and I use it for reciprocity when I am trying to make a connection with someone. But the one that gets me into the most trouble is catharsis. It helps my grieving process to talk about things, but unfortunately I don't always make the best choices of context in how much I share or where I'm sharing it. I talk about my son's cancer and death too often, and it is uncomfortable for people who have not been through something like that. I'm working on holding back and not jumping straight into talking about things until I'm fairly sure the context will be appropriate. I have used a picture that my husband drew of my big mouth. I like sound, but sometimes when I'm concentrating on listening to something or I'm wrapped up in thoughts of my own, I tune out the other sounds and I don't realize that I am being spoken to. I have often asked people to repeat themselves. Physiological noise is also one of the biggest barriers to listening well for me. Because I live with a great deal of pain, I find that it is distracting at times. It is hard to listen to someone talking when every part of my body is aching and I am concentrating on keeping my knees from buckling. I will ask people if they mind if I sit down before I can actually attend properly. In class recently, I was experiencing a grief wave, which makes it feel like my head is full of sound and my heart and body are going to burst from the pain of loss. I was actually physically unable to concentrate enough to read subtitles and had to ask to complete the assignment the next day. From the textbook activity, What Kind of Listener Am I learned that when I do listen and attend to what people are telling me, I am a supportive responder with 3 supportive answers, 1 emphasizing and 1 paraphrasing. Because I want to help others but not steamroll over them, I try to be supportive. I have used a supportive column to represent my listening style and a grief wave to represent the physiological noise that keeps me from listening. I have an aggressive conflict style. My conflict style used to be an avoider. I didn't want conflict at all, so I kept my head down, put up with abuse, or accommodated by accepting blame for things I didn't do. I was always on the losing side of win-lose. Then, when my first child was in elementary school, there was an incident in which a parent got the school board on their side trying to have my child removed from the school. They felt that because of his autism, he was not behaving like the other children and he didn't fit the image they wanted for the private school. I became the proverbial mama bear. I fought for my child tooth and nail and nothing was going to get in my way. It made me more aggressive and less passive. After that, if there was conflict, I focused on what I needed, but I didn't try to see both sides of a situation or use empathy. I carried this into many areas of my life and I damaged my marriage knowing it was important to stand up for myself, but not looking for win-win solutions. I really didn't like what it did to my loved ones. I knew it was important to stand up for my family and for myself, but I hadn't learned how to do it correctly. It is a slow road to try to reach an assertive style of communication, stating my needs, listening to the other person, and working together to come up with a win-win. I recently used it with a classmate, and it sort of worked. I used a bear on my poster to represent the aggressive conflict style I'm trying to shed. I am empathetic. Most of my life I knew I could feel deeply for other people. After watching my child suffer through cancer, then die a slow, agonizing death, my relationship with empathy has changed. As I sat in the hospital day after day, I saw so many people suffering, so many families worrying, grieving, managing, loving, and even celebrating. I watched and listened to many different perspectives, and I came to realize that my idea of empathy was fairly narrow. I had felt for people, but often in the context of my own perspectives. As Brené Brown says, empathy is the capacity to understand what another person is experiencing from within the other person's frame of reference, i.e. the capacity to place oneself in another's shoes. I was learning to see more perspectives. We were all in the hospital because of grave illness. We had similar concerns, but there were so many factors, reactions, cultures, and ways of coping. I learned a lot more about accepting people's emotions without judgment, even the negative ones. I'm not trying to make them feel better, because in a situation like that, there really is no feeling better. The hospital helped me to see that I had been too wrapped up in myself. I have used a gray brain cancer ribbon to represent the hospital time and a picture of me holding my son's hand before he died, to represent I am with you, or empathy. Thank you.